Happy Tuesday evening, Bills Mafia and football fans. That red light is on, which means this week's episode of Under Review is officially live. The draft has finally come to a close. Put your mock drafts down and listen up because the newest class of Buffalo Bills is here. Joining me tonight is co-host of Shout, Ryan Talbot, and also joining me later on is John Helmkamp of Cover One as we navigate this prospect pool and talk about all of the traits they have that can translate well to the Buffalo Bills. I am so excited for this one, folks, and I hope you are too. If you could be as kind as to drop a like on this video, that would be greatly appreciated. But without further ado, I will end my rambling. I will roll the intro, and I will tell you all, let's go.
Previous play will go under review.
Once again, everybody, thank you so much for being here. Ryan, first time on the show. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you getting the chance to come on here and speak. And, I know you got a lot of things going on and you guys were busting, crazy amounts of content out during the draft. So appreciate your time. How you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for reaching out and having me on.
For sure, man. So let's get right to it. Obviously, the Buffalo Bills, in a bit of a controversial way, navigated this draft, making that trade with Kansas City, getting out of the first round, going into the second, and a lot of picks that you could say are, in my opinion, projects here. So before we get really deep into the names, I just want to ask you your overall thoughts on this class, what you really liked about their approach, and maybe things that you thought could have been done differently or something that you're just curious to see.
When it comes to this class, I think that Brandon Beane, one, he always stays true to his board. He wasn't sitting there saying, okay, we need an X wide receiver. We need another safety. We need a rotational piece to our defensive tackle room. But in a way, it worked out perfectly because pick after pick after pick address needs on this team, not just for this year, but for the year down the road or 2 years down the road. There's some picks where maybe they don't start as rookies, but year two, they're going to be asked to be a key contributor. So I really like this draft class from that perspective in terms of addressing needs. It wasn't the flashiest draft. It wasn't big name after big name, but a lot of really good, solid players that I think are going to come in and contribute year one.
Firmly agree with that. And when I looked at a lot of their picks, to me, it told me two things. One, again, they're not afraid of developing a lot of these guys, even in a team that you could consider in a win now mode, which when you have Josh Allen, that's every season. But also the fact that a lot of these guys are traitsy guys. And you've seen Brandon Beane make that approach in the first round in the past with guys like Gregory Rousseau, Kyer Elam. And then he does it again with his first selection, Keon Coleman, 6'3", 215. Really just one of the more, as it's been described by so many people, polarizing prospects in this class who really does feel like someone that, if you get the right development curve to him, will mold into someone that could be a really, honestly, a star in this league. So let's start with him. And I want to hear your thoughts just on this prospect and what you think he brings to the Bills as a whole.
Yeah, so obviously, first and foremost, the Bills lost two key contributors this offseason, trading Stephon Diggs, losing Gabe Davis in free agency to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, the Bills, they had a need, one, for an X receiver, and two, they just had a need for wide receiver overall. They have to address some of those lost targets. And Keon Coleman, the prospect in terms of where he was in this draft, was a really good fit. He is that X receiver that I feel like this team has been looking for the past few seasons. The catch radius is a huge factor, I think, that came into this decision. I think that the route running aspect of things has been, I think people have been a little too critical of him, the separation issues especially. I was listening to, I believe it was Ben Solak today, and he had a really good piece where he talked about the separation issues are not what people are making them out to be. He watched a lot of the Keon Coleman games, had more to do with the quarterback throwing him into contest catches situations where he was creating that separation. So with Josh Allen, with that arm, first of all, he can squeeze passes into tight windows anyways, but I think that some of the knocks against him have been a little bit overblown. I think that the 40-yard dash time was really, really counted against him, which, that's not the best way to analyze a prospect in terms of what they can do on the field. You can look at the gauntlet, you can look at the route running speeds, things like that I think are better viewpoints of what these players can do. So, he's a willing blocker. That's another thing that they're going to look for. I think that his ceiling is extremely high, but even if he doesn't end up being wide receiver 1 on this team in 2-3 years from now, he still is going to take that Gabe Davis role at minimum. He might be the T. Higgins before the Jamar Chase. And I'm not saying that skill set wise. I'm saying they drafted a number 2 before they got their number 1. I think Keon Coleman can be a number 1 receiver, but time will tell.
Yeah, I love the point you made about his separation, because Keon Coleman as a prospect, when I initially watched him, that wasn't really something that jumped off the screen, but it wasn't something I worried about in the sense that he couldn't do it in other parts of the field. And I think a lot of the discourse surrounding Coleman stems from, well, he can't go upfield and separate, so he can't do it at all. There's multiple ways. And I think that that's one thing where when I watch him and I see some of the other ways he was able to do it at FSU, at Michigan State, those are kind of the things that made me encouraged. And I forgot the matchup. I think it was against Wisconsin, but he had a game where I was watching him really carefully in the intermediate parts of the field and seeing how he was doing so when he was lined out wide. He's got a very nice hitch, and he has a very nice sense of lateral agility to where when I watch him, I see the vision. I can see the vision of having Keon Coleman kind of stress defenses because he's actually able to work the sidelines and work the boundary in that sense. And also, like you said, even if the separation, whatever people are making it out to be as way worse than it actually is, I think one thing that I like is that he doesn't need crazy amounts of separation to make a good catch. Like, I've seen him get maybe 2 yards of cushion, and that's really all he needs. And with Josh Allen being the type of quarterback he is, that's what you want. I mean, put the ball on a spot, let him turn his hips around, and then all of a sudden, bang, it's just cradled in and he's good to go. So, I mean, that's something I liked about him. But I also want to ask you, Ryan, about his drops, because there aren't many. I mean, at a PFF at 4.2% drop rate throughout his entire collegiate career. I mean, talk to me more about just like that need that was really missing from this wide receiver room last season and how that could really impact them going forward.
I think drops have been a killer for this offense over the past few years. And I think that was a big factor that this team was looking for in terms of, okay, who can we bring in this draft class that has sure hands or as close to sure hands as you can get? Because he does a lot of good things once the ball is in his hands. He's hard to bring down, so you're going to get the yards after the catch. He's going to be that red zone guy that you can throw it up to and hopefully you can haul it in and for a touchdown. So having those hands where the Bills have had so many bad drops on 3rd downs, 4th downs, or other key situations that maybe Josh Allen and the Bills offense has been backed up and he makes a great throw and then the receiver just doesn't haul it in. So that was definitely a key factor in terms of what I think one of the intangibles they were looking for in a wide receiver in this draft class.
And some of the drop issues that you saw, I mean, you saw them from James Cook, even at times Dawson Knox, Dalton Kincaid a few times, but he's a rookie. He's working in. I even expect Coleman in his rookie year to have some drops just because handling a Josh Allen ball is different than a Jordan Travis ball. That thing has about 30 extra miles of gas on it. But it's something that I love to see the front office prioritizing with this receiving core, because you need the steady hands. And I don't think it's just a matter of the production on the field and how you fare in the red zone, but really implementing chemistry with Josh Allen. Because when you're talking about bringing in this new receiver that Josh Allen had said was one of the guys on his list that he would have loved to play with, and you talk about a target that the first game or the first practice, he's hurling things really at his full velocity and he's hauling them in, even in tight contested windows, that's a great boost for a quarterback to continue targeting you and maybe make more defenses respect you too. Because if you're catching things in a phone booth, I mean, how do you really stop it? So it's something that I really like. I'm really excited to see more of him and how they scheme him. But Ryan, any final thoughts on Keon Coleman? Something you don't think we touched upon or something you wanted to say before we moved on?
No, I think you pretty much hit it all. But, one more thing on the hands. I think you can go back to Khalil Shakir a few years ago. He was another player, a prospect coming out where the hands were a big factor of in his game and in his assessment. He doesn't drop a lot. Now, he did have some drops in his rookie season, but one thing he improved upon was he was pretty much catching everything Josh Allen threw his way last year. And that's why you saw that uptick in targets, uptick in production in year two, later on in the season. So Keon Coleman, there will be an adjustment period. Like you said, it's a fastball from Josh Allen, whether it's downfield or whether it's just a quick out. He doesn't usually take any zip off those throws. So once he has that down, though, I really think he can be a productive member of this team as a rookie.
For sure. And one final thing I'll say about Coleman, too, is, I've seen people toy with the idea of what if he was a power slot instead of an X, but Brandon Beane has established he wants him to be an X. We'll see how, much truth there is to that really towards training camp and when the season starts. But I'm really excited for red zone looks with Keon Coleman, whether that's out of 11, out of 12, because one thing the Bills love doing is a quick window throw. They tried it with Stephon Diggs so many times, with Gabe Davis, and there were times where it worked well and times where there were drops, like we have said. I think Keon Coleman is the perfect candidate to really up your productivity in that regard. And when they trot him out in the red zone, I'm fully expecting the ball to go to him on first look. So that's one thing I'm excited about. But let's move on to the second round pick, other second round pick. I treat Coleman like he's a first, not a first.
I know.
Your other second round pick, Cole Bishop, 6'2", 207. This is a guy that, has that versatility where you could have him as a box safety, but has played a bit of center field, more box than center. Talk to me about this prospect and what you really like about him. And again, some of the things that you could see him doing in this Bills defense.
Yeah, my favorite safety in this draft class. He was right there neck and neck with Tyler Nubin. And Cooper DeJean deserves to be in that conversation too, but I don't know where he's going to play in Philadelphia, corner or safety. They might end up playing him at both spots and trying him out. But in terms of a pure safety prospect, Cole Bishop was high on my list. Instincts off the charts. That's one thing. It's the one thing you can't teach a safety is instincts. You either have them or you don't. Another prospect that a lot of Bills fans had the Bills linked to in this draft class was Cam Kinchins, and Kinchins didn't test well, but the instincts were there. So I always thought he could have been an option as well. Instincts are so important in playing safety, especially I would say in any system, but Sean McDermott's system especially. You have the intelligence, you have the explosiveness. I think that even as a rookie, if you don't want to jot him out there week one, have him starting opposite Taylor Rapp, you could have Mike Edwards out there with Rapp. You can use him as the third safety, and he is so good as a blitzer already. From what I saw from him at Utah, you can utilize him in that regard and kind of bring him along, ease him in. And then by the end of the rookie season, you could probably get him onto the field as a more regular contributor or even starter.
Yeah, I am such a fan of the way that he plays, especially closer to the line. And I think the potential is there if you did want to mold him into someone who's playing deeper up. And I think the way they've constructed their safety room this season is very interesting in general, because you have Mike Edwards, who we know can play really either spot if you need him to. Taylor Rapp can go all over the field. It seems like, and this is something that I've talked about with some of the guys in Cover One, a few people, they want to implement fluidity. They want that positionless style where it's a player that I can assign where I need him versus boxing him into one role. Now, if they start him out as a pure box safety, I'll understand it, just to work him in and see how he fares behind the linebackers or next to him. But I think that his ceiling is so high in a Sean McDermott defense. And again, you brought it up, but just watching him at Utah and how he hits, it's not just a matter of being in position and watching him recognize it and slow it down. He's coming for you. He is going to bring you down at all costs as if you did something to wrong him. And I absolutely love watching it. And I think that mentality, the physical presence of just a hard hitter that you lost with losing a guy like Jordan Poyer, can be kind of reclaimed with a guy like Cole Bishop. So that's just something I'm really, really excited to watch.
Yeah, and this regime, I saw a lot about, well, they haven't had a really draft a safety. Well, of course not. You brought in Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer in the same year in McDermott's first season, and they were unbelievable from the start. But now that they're potentially both gone, Micah Hyde could come back in season or something along those lines. You need to find someone who has similar traits. And again, it's instincts and intelligence for me. I think those are two traits that Sean McDermott covets when it comes to the safety play. And he is off the charts, that being Cole Bishop, of course, in those areas. So it's going to be I think it's going to be a quick acclimation to him, to this defense. I know it's not the easiest defense to learn, but once he gets that playbook in his hand, I think he's going to be able to come in and impress sooner rather than later.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I kind of envisioned when they took him to, especially because beyond just the recognition, beyond that intelligence as a safety, but also the peak athleticism too. I think his RAS score was around 9.5. I think it was 9.8. Sorry, I wrote it down and I couldn't read it for a second. But it's the combination of that pro-ready mentality where you're seeing just how smart he is on the back end, mixed with that athleticism, that I think Sean McDermott is going to be able to work him up to a pro level pretty quickly. And that's not to say that, a rookie safety is going to have every assignment down pat or know where he needs to be all the time. Growing pains exist for everybody. But I think as far as seamless transitions where you're really confident in all facets of how this kid could play in his rookie year, he's one I'm genuinely excited about. And one final point that I really wanted to go over with you too was the fact that one of his really major, if not the biggest strength of his game is how he carries tight ends and slot receivers and works in that part of the field. That's a massive component. And I think that could have been what really pushed them to take him. What made Brandon Beane pump his fist in the war room is you have to deal with Travis Kelce. You have to deal with other great tight ends in the AFC. If you mean to tell me that you just drafted a kid who can carry them well, in addition to some of your other DBs, that's a massive swing for this Bills defense in a transitional phase. I mean, do you agree with this?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, Brock Bowers is in the AFC now, and I know he's a rookie, but I'm high on him. You have Mark Andrews. You have so many really good tight ends, just league-wide, not just AFC. And if you have a chess piece that can, I won't say eliminate, because those pass catchers are as talented as they come, but if you can limit their game, limit their numbers, that can really frustrate those high-flying offenses like Kansas City with Mahomes, because he's always going to be Kelce, that is Mahomes' number one target until he really slows down, at least. And if you can factor him out a little bit, then good things are going to happen for this Bills team. You get a few stops, you get the ball back, and in a playoff game, that's when you can finally kind of get that win over the team that's been a thorn in your side for so long.
And one final thought on it too, to further that point, because I agree completely. I don't think Kelce's slowing down. If anything, you got your hopeful anti-Kelce DB. But another thing too is I feel like one thing that's been talked about in the past when it comes to how NFL defenses are kind of scheming up explosive plays, more of that too high system and more of how they're making offenses start to throw it a bit shorter, try to work your way down the field. It almost feels like to me this is another answer for that, where maybe in the future, if it's not this year, but next year, or with a free agent still pending, whatever it may be, that maybe they want someone that they feel can take that away from teams. If a team is trying to be a bit more methodical when they throw on you or run on you, then let's get someone who can really man the middle of the field and just make it that much harder. And I'm rooting for the kid. I really like the pick. I was super excited when they did it, and I think he has a very promising future in a Sean McDermott defense. But I want to move on to this next player because this was one of my draft crushes. I absolutely love this prospect. Anyone who follows me on Twitter saw me freak out about it. I was, full disclosure, Ryan, we were in Radio Row when this happened. You would have thought we just won the Super Bowl. I was pumping my fist. I was so hyped. I kept telling the guys, I hope it's Carter because Carter's falling to them so far. Dwayne Carter, 6'3", 305 DT from Duke, can play a myriad of positions on the interior defensive line. I mean, this is one of my favorite picks they made, but I'd love to hear your take on it.
Yeah, so play aside for 1 minute. The one thing I'll say about this draft class is it was every player. It was a high character player, and I don't know if you can get higher character than Mr. Duke here with Dwayne Carter. Everything he does on and off the field, but 3-time captain at Duke University. That speaks volumes about the player he is, not just on the field, but also in the locker room. The Bills are getting a player that I think will quickly emerge as a fan favorite here. I know Keon Coleman has quickly become the fan favorite with all the social media clips, but in terms of like on the field play and work in the community, has kind of a Harrison Phillips feel in terms of the way that he was beloved by this organization. Again, not comparing skill sets, just the way that he was brought in and what he did outside of the field. But Dwayne Carter is going to be a great rotational piece on this defensive line on the interior. You look last season, Ed Oliver, unbelievable season. DaQuan Jones, unbelievable first 4 weeks. And then obviously the injury occurs and you saw the depth. And over time, it did get a little bit better. The play stiffened up a little bit, but the rotational pieces were very inconsistent. I thought Tim Settle played a little bit better. I thought Jordan Phillips did not play that great. They couldn't get Poona Ford on the field, or they wouldn't let him on the field for whatever reason. There were some issues with the depth behind Ed Oliver and the injured DaQuan Jones. So now I feel they've addressed that. You bring in Carter, you bring in Austin Johnson. I like that 1 through 4 rotation. You have Ilianku. You have other guys that are going to be in here and competing for those last spots. So I really do like the way that they address this because, again, you're one injury away from needing someone to play significant reps. And Carter's a guy that I think you would feel pretty comfortable having out there, even as a rookie, if need be.
Yes. And one thing to that was what I really wanted when they picked the DT was this endless onslaught of pass rush, no matter who was filling in. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean take Ed Oliver away from his snap count or take DaQuan Jones away, but I want it so that when either of those guys have to come off the field for whatever reason, there's still a relentless presence up the middle. And like you said, there were flashes or occasional hits here from the guys like Tim Settle or even Poona Ford in that Tampa game. I remember had a nice little bull rush and got through, but it was never consistent. And I just think back to games like New England in Foxborough or just later in the season where you saw that interior presence without DaQuan Jones have a really tough transition into getting stability. I think even though Dwayne Carter has to work up to what you could potentially ask him to do that Jones does already, so I think a few years in that spot, because I know he was able to play in those parts of the line, having him just starting out as a rotational 3-tech behind Ed is really exciting because I think that pass rush juice is real. I think the bull rush and the first step are real. I think he is an aggressive, attack-minded defensive tackle. It gets him into trouble sometimes, but it also leads to some really fun results. And if you're talking to me about a true pass rush set and maybe some weird looks where you want to have him next to Ed, or maybe Ed has to come off, this is a guy that, I don't think that drop off is going to be very big for long. I love what he brings to the table. I think despite being a great, off the field presence and what he brings to the table there. And he just seems like the greatest dude ever. On the field, he is a leader. He gets everyone galvanized and he brings that with his play. And it's just one of the reasons why I was so big on drafting him beyond just all those intangibles, but I also just see the vision and I'm truly excited. And I guess I just want to ask you, as I love DaQuan Jones, but we know it's a 2-year deal. We know that age is a thing. Is this a player that you could see inheriting the role should he be able to anchor himself a bit better against doubles and have more productivity? Or do you think his role really exists as a true rotational as a ceiling?
So I wouldn't say it exists as a true rotational. I could see him as a more of a, Ed Oliver role, but we have Ed Oliver on this team. So that's the kind of the problem there. So in that sense, it would be more of a rotational piece. If he can anchor a little bit though, maybe he could be the heir apparent for DaQuan Jones, but you kind of read my mind with something you said a few minutes ago. On obvious pass rush downs, get him next to Ed Oliver. You can take DaQuan off the field. Get those two guys next to each other. Let them try to crash the interior, whether it's moving the quarterback off of his spot or getting to the quarterback. All good things that I could see happening with those two next to one another this year. And then for the rotational piece, listen, I'm sure, I haven't looked at the actual numbers, but there's few defenses that rotate their D-line more, I'm guessing, than Sean McDermott does. So even if he is this rotational piece for a few years, he's going to see a good amount of snap counts in Buffalo week by week once he's comfortable in this system.
Yes, I agree with that. And like any prospect in here, maybe except Cole Bishop, I actually think Cole Bishop is going to get a lot of play very quickly. Yeah. Coleman too. But as far as expectations for what their ceiling could be in year one, my patience is there with Carter. I am not expecting him to come in and have 10 sacks. That'd be great. That'd be a lot of fun. But yeah, just to start out as a rotational piece is what I want from him. And I think what's good about that and what we just talked about with the opportunity to kind of I don't want to say take Daquan Jones off the field, but you know that with the pec injury that just happened, there is that risk of, is he going to get hurt again? What do we do? I like the idea of having the opportunity to still have a productive pass rush and let him get his rest and just keeping that flow going. And I hope it works out. So that's a prospect I love. I'm glad we got to talk about him. Ryan, I know we only got you for a few more minutes, and you did tell me who it was already, so I know the answer. But our chat does not know the answer. Of those day 3 picks, I would love for you to just share some of your favorites, your favorite, and really, again, what you see their role being for the Bills.
Yeah, so, shout out Catherine Fitzgerald. I've said this a few times on radio spots and things. She called him Cedric the Centertainer.
That's
Cedric, great name, right?
That's
Cedric
great.
Pran Granger, or Granger, excuse me. I like him a lot. I think that he could actually start right out of the gate for the Bills as center. Now, I know that we've already heard the plans. Connor McGovern's going to move from left guard over to center, and you're going to have David Edwards probably playing left guard. That's a little messy to me. You're messing with what worked last season, and it's not just, well, how's it going to affect the center play? How's it going to affect the left guard play? How does it affect Dion Dawkins? Dawkins, it always feels like there's a guy that does not stay very long at left guard next to him. And last year, McGovern was that stabilizing force, and I think it allowed Dion Dawkins to have the year that he did. So if you can keep McGovern at left guard, put in Granger at center, and let him do what he did at Georgia, then I think this offensive line is poised to even go to the next level. Mitch Morse, in terms of the leadership abilities, in terms of the athleticism and what he did getting to the next level, unbelievable. He will be missed. But in terms of a powerful force in the middle of this offensive line, in terms of someone that doesn't give up a lot of quarterback sacks, I think someone that could open up some more run lanes for this team. I loved that pick in round 5.
I liked it a lot too once I learned more about it. Admittedly, I was very top heavy in my center research because I didn't really know how they were going to attack it. And when I saw the transition of McGovern to center, I was like, okay, let's see if this works. I mean, I said it in the past. I trust Aaron Kromer. I love him as a coach. Yeah. It could work very well, but it wasn't my preferred method. I really wanted to hold on to Mitch Morse and just not rock the boat. That boat's been rocked. In fact, a large wave made it move around. And when they made this pick and I found out he was a center and I learned more about him, this feels like kind of the Bills this season's worst kept secret, in that they really, if this guy pans out and looks good in camp, or at least Cromer's raving about him, he's going to be the center. It almost feels like it's an inevitable thing. It's a matter of when. And I love that you said that because, again, I would prefer McGovern to slide over to guard. That's where he played. He did really well in his first year. Why change that up instead of just having him maintain that spot, maintain the stability on the line, and then eventually let this kid work in and just be the stout center for years to come? And we talked about this offline, but I'm going to read it here because this is the stat that I just genuinely could not believe reading it. But playing at Georgia in the SEC, this man gave up 1 sack in 4 seasons. That is 2,746 total snaps. He gave up one sack. It was about 1,000 or so, 1,000 something pass blocking. I can't remember off the top of my head. But even then, that level of consistency is just so impressive when you're playing against that kind of competition. And it's why I really liked him as a prospect, learning more about him. And I'm glad you do too. I mean, any other thoughts about him?
Yeah, I guess just in terms of what I'm expecting to see, I think this is another Osiris Torrance type situation where you don't hand them the job, you go to camp, like you said, you let them compete. But it wouldn't shock me after a week or two if he was getting those first team reps and they were working him in a little bit more. And before you know it, you have McGovern back to guard. And this will be a competition as long as it needs to be. But the upside for him to be a day 1 starter is there. And then, when you mentioned the only 1 sack allowed, Josh Allen's already one of the hardest quarterbacks in this league to sack. You put someone that's in front of him that can actually, hold those blocks for maybe a half second longer or a second longer. And that's going to allow Allen, one, to scan the field a little bit more, to move around a little bit, and defenses get nervous once he starts moving, whether it's in the pocket or outside. So I was very high on that pick of all the day 3 selections.
Yes, and the only thing I really would worry about is just let's see how that chemistry builds up. But again, if there's an emphasis that, Josh, meet Cedric, this is your center, meet him, get that chemistry down, I think it could pan out. And again, the escapability of Josh Allen is one of his best traits. You're helping your O-line and also sometimes getting them into trouble, but most of the time helping your O-line. And hopefully with this kid, a round 5 pick, it can pan out. But Ryan, I know you got to run. I really appreciate your time again. Feel free to let the chat know where they can find you, what you got going on, and any final thoughts you may have for us.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at Ryan Talbot Bills. You can find my work at Syracuse.com and NYUp.com. And you can find Shout on every major podcast platform. Thoughts on this draft class? I think that they address as many needs as they possibly could. They have some guys that I think will start year one. Like some of those back end day 3 picks in terms of developmental prospects on the O-line. Because as you mentioned, Aaron Cromer, he's done a really good job here developing players. What he did with Osiris Torrance year 1, what he's done with the Ryan Vandemarks and the Alec Andersons of the world. I think those late day 3 picks, both of them could develop, and both of them are raw pieces of clay. You talk about Grable, and he only played offensive line 4 years. He was a high school quarterback, moved over to tight end, and now he's, O-lineman for the last 4 years. He's another guy that I think you can probably get him on the practice squad. You can probably bring him along and maybe turn him into something as well.
I agree with that. That's another project for Cromer that I think he's going to take into the lab and trying to mold something. I know his past productivity and his protection improved steadily at his during his time in college. I can't talk. I apologize. Starting mainly at left tackle, and in his senior season, he gave up no sacks and only 1 quarterback hit. So, I mean, the productivity is there. And I trust Cromer with a guy of his frame, especially when it means fortifying the depth for Josh Allen. But again, Ryan, truly appreciate your time. I know you got a lot going on. And for everyone in our chat, again, please follow Ryan on Twitter. I had your handle up, and I need to take this banner down so I could be able to actually show it and this comment down. StreamYard does that sometimes.
Yeah.
Where I click a button and then there we go. Talbot Bills. Well, I flubbed that, but please throw them a follow. Check out Shout if you can. It's a great piece of content in our sect. Honestly, these guys do incredible work for all of you, and it's very much worth your time. So, Ryan, thank you so much again for being here. You're welcome back anytime, and I hope you have a great night.
All right, you too. See ya.
Take it easy, man. All right, everybody. So we are going to continue this with another guest, another person I am very excited to put on this show again. He has been here before. He was one of my many partners in crime out in Detroit, and his name is John Hellcat. John, thank you for being here, my friend. How are you doing tonight, sir?
Oh, long time no see, my friend. How you hanging? I'm rolling the sparkling seltzer train from Detroit. We're just keeping that bad boy going. Having a lot of fun, man. I've let this draft class kind of settle. You know what I mean? I've kind of come around to it, let it simmer. And I think there's a pretty direct plan in place for what Brandon Beane wanted to do in the front office there. We'll get to it. We'll talk about some of these late round picks, but I'm excited. I think we got a good group to work with, some high character people. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I'm excited to dive into it a little bit deeper. I am also on the seltzer train. This is not a beer. I didn't tell Ryan it wasn't beer either, so I hope he didn't think I was drinking a beer. This is Spindrift, a.k.a. the best seltzer that exists. If you think there's a better one, I'm sorry to tell you, you're wrong. And also, full disclosure, when we were there in Radio Row, they had bubbly seltzers in the cooler. Okay. I drank in 2 days, probably got to 15 of them, I think.
You're underselling the fact that you knocked out 9 on the first night. Okay? 9 seltzers on night 1 of the NFL draft. I was trying my best to keep up. I think I had like 4 or 5. Our table was just littered with these bubbly cans. It was incredible. It was true.
There were so many empty cans because I would throw them out, recycle them, by the way. I'm not a monster, but I would recycle them like 3 or 4 at a time, and I would just go palm a bunch because no one was taking them. And there were blackberry and blueberry. I love those flavors. I love seltzer. And John, Sarah Christine says, amazing beer, because it is an amazing beer.
Well, thank you
so much. To throw that. All right. Well, we are going to continue this conversation, but before we do, also, I just realized I had the Keon Coleman banner the entire time we went through that combo. That is on me. But I'm going to play a read from our good friends, Aaron Quinn and Greg Thompson, to tell you about the One Pass. Gentlemen, What do you got?
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Yes,
before we keep rolling, hold on. This comment here, been looking for a good Coleman breakdown vid. I think that I should do one. I think that I need to do that and throw it up on our Cover One college football channel. I've got a few clips that have already been saved. So give me a few days to play around with that and get it edited and stuff like that. I will break down a Keon Coleman kind of Bills specific video about how he might pair up with Josh Allen and what the Bills like to do. Maybe I'll get some input from other guys in the Cover One group chat and just kind of get some info to mix in there as well. But this sounds like a fun little project. So I'm going to do that. Off top of my head right now, I'm committing. I'm going to do
There you go. You heard it here first, folks. He is going to do that. And honestly, having to get firsthand experience with John and be able to hear his insight on all of these prospects that we talked about, I mean, I would be very excited to watch it. And I recommend you guys, if you haven't already, check out all of John's content, follow him on Twitter, because really a lot of draft prospect insight that I wasn't aware of, or I know a lot of people were learning for the first time, came from him, and it's excellent analysis. So please do yourself a favor and check that out. Also, I know that Eric put out a Keon Coleman video. I think he dropped it last night, where someone made a comment and called him maybe Megatron, but not like, oh, maybe he'll be Megatron. The nickname is maybe Megatron, which that is absolutely amazing. So shout out to whoever did that. That's hilarious. And also shout out to you, Buff Everett, for saying hydration is important. It is. This is the vibe I'm trying to get in the comment section tonight. Talk about hydration. Talk about how it's totally normal to drink 15 seltzers in 2 days and eat 2 Uncrustables back to back. That's a different conversation.
Oh man, don't get into the Uncrustable combo.
We can't go on the Uncrustable path tonight, but everybody, for 60 gold doubloons, you could become a One Pass member. That One Pass is the lifeblood of our network. It allows us to have access to all of the resources that we use to comprise data, to find the film, to do whatever we can to bring the content back out to all of you, our wonderful viewers. I truly appreciate all of you being here, listening after the fact, whatever it may be. Please drop a like on this video if you haven't already. It would mean the world to me. It helps our channel out immensely. Whether you're on Facebook, whether you're on YouTube, if you're on Twitter, I think you could spam those like heart reacts. I don't think I actually see it on my end, but do it anyways and show your love through the phone. It would be appreciated. Thank you all so much. Okay, John, let's kick it. Keon Coleman's the hot button topic. So we will talk about this whole class. We got some time, but I want to hear your thoughts on him because there's a lot of yes to this was a great pick and why did you make this pick when it comes to discussing Keon Coleman. And I discussed with Ryan earlier a few of the things I liked about him, but I really want to hear your perspective on him as well.
Yeah, when I joined on with Cover One back in, must have been November, I think is when I started on with Cover One. Jeez, are we really 6 months in at this point? Like coming up on 6 months? That's crazy.
Nice.
When I got into the group chat back in November, I think one of the first things that I put in there was a Keon Coleman highlight. He was a name that I was early circling as someone that I wanted for the Bills. And then as the draft process went, the only reason that I kind of decided to lean away from him a little bit is because I wanted more of a speed deep threat. And that was kind of the prevailing wisdom in the conversations that we've all been having a lot. Even in Detroit, when we were going into round 2 and we were picking our favorite fits for day 2, I wanted it to either be someone that had more experience or someone that had more speed, and those are kind of the thoughts that were going through my head as we were entering into it. And Keon Coleman, his name comes up and it was kind of like okay, here we go. Like, okay, like it's Keon. But I think this comment is exactly what I was going to get to here. I think what we saw with the pick of Keon Coleman, and we kind of talked about this on site a little bit, just walking around the draft experience. I think that the coaching, plan that's in place, the comfort that Brandon Beane has with Sean McDermott and the rest of the coaching staff as a place to develop players, I think that they were leaning hard into this identity of taking someone with incredible upside and being able to mold that. I heard you talking about molding balls of clay with Talbot right before I came on. I think that goes all the way throughout the draft. I think top to bottom, that goes down the list of all these picks, starting with Keon Coleman. This is a 20-year-old that's 6'3", 215, has had a lot of adversity, has had a not great situations that he found himself in college, still was able to produce 11 touchdowns this last season, is athletic with the ball in his hands. They talked about all offseason wanting players that can turn 5 yards into 50. Coleman can do that, just not with 4.2 speed. He does it in other ways, with physicality, with making a guy miss or stiff arming him or breaking a tackle at the catch point, and then getting to that next level. So I think what we saw with the Keon Coleman pick was probably confidence in the character, because they met with him. And after seeing him with the media, you cannot help but fall in love with this guy instantly. I mean, Bills Mafia is already just gushing over the kid, and rightly so. He's so authentic. He's so himself. He's so humble. He's talking about buying discount jackets during the summer from Macy's. Like, this is not a flashy pick. This is a hardworking pick that's very humble and confident in who he is as a person and the talent that he brings and the upside that he has to offer. I think that it was a great pick, and I think that he's going to fit in incredibly well. And we heard Brandon Beane say it. They're going to count on him early. They didn't mince words with that. There was no like, yeah, we're going to bring him along slowly and work him in. No, they're like, nope. We're expecting Keon Coleman to be a large contributor right away from day one at only 20 years old. So they have high expectations, and I think it's fair for Bills fans to kind of have those expectations as well.
Oh, for sure. I mean, he's taken at the top of the second round, essentially a first-round pick, and that's what you want from him. You need him to be that, because you lost Stephon Diggs and you lost Gabe Davis, and there are vacated targets, and they took one receiver. They obviously have some undrafted free agents, but they drafted one receiver. So there's expectations on him. Mine personally are what I've kind of set out since we started talking about the draft. You know, a fair like 700 yards, maybe more, maybe less. As long as he's productive, that's what I want. But when you're talking about his fit in this offense and him as the X, people are worried about it, myself included, only for the fact that while FSU force-fed him deep balls, and that was pretty much it, it was just like, hey, go up and get it, go up and get it, go up and get it. And Eric does a great job talking about this specific problem in FSU's offense too. It's really one of those things where there's other ways that he can get open. And when you go back to his Michigan State days, you see those on display. And I mentioned it earlier with Ryan, but I love the shiftiness of this game when it comes to his lateral type, where that's not the right way to say that, but lateral going across the field, like seeing the way he can hitch, seeing the way that he can use a defender's momentum against them at times. Those little nuances are there in this game. And it's at a point where it almost feels like, even if you're lining him up wide, if you can find ways to get him going across the field, whether that's on, wide slants or whether that's on some sort of outside breaking hitch, like these are the things that I would really like to see them do, because like I mentioned earlier, and like I've seen with so many things, he does not need 10 yards of separation to make a great catch, right? He doesn't need to be that, because that's not who he is, right? He's not a guy that's going to be a 4.21 or a 4.37 40, and he's going to blaze past you, and you got to keep up with him or you're in his dust. What he is a guy that, as long as you give him a little bit of distance, that's all he needs to come down with the ball. And when you talk about Josh Allen, who, yes, he has had separators in the past, and I had those same concerns, John, about who they should draft. And it's why we were talking about Franklin on the show. I couldn't believe that fall. Well, we were talking about guys.
I still can't believe it's on the fourth.
Talking about like McConkey, all these guys, that's what I was envisioning. But I guess with Coleman, he still is a guy that you could throw into the spot and he could be there to get it. And even with the DBs wrapped around him, it's still good enough where he's able to bring it in. So that's really what I think as far as the type of receiver and what he could bring to the offense, they're banking on. And I'm hoping it works. There's obviously a lot of questions still to be answered. But if you're working Keon Coleman in a way where similar to what you were working with Diggs, and I'm not comparing the players by skill set, I am comparing the fact that it is an X. Please do not say I am making Keon Coleman sound like Stephon Diggs. I am not. But if you are talking about your new X receiver and how they would typically use Diggs in that role, where they would move him around all over the field and sometimes put him in the slot and sometimes move him maybe in pre-snap motion or even in the backfield sometimes with Joe Brady, or have him go up. If you are saying that there are going to be a myriad of places for him to go all over the field, a myriad of routes and places Josh can spot him the ball, then I'm more encouraged for the role. And even if it's not 1,500 yards in his rookie year, if you're giving me productivity and helping the offense stay stable and continue to progress, that's what I want, and I will be happy with it.
We talked about it out in Detroit when talking about Keon Coleman. I think there's an avenue where you could put him on a growth plan in the NFL, similar to what DK Metcalf did, which was kind of a limited route tree coming out of college. He lined up as the X for Ole Miss, ran a lot of goes and slants and posts. Like that was pretty much what he did. And I think Coleman got a lot of that same utilization. Although I do think that Coleman coming out of college, like you said, I like him a lot coming across the field. We talked about putting him into, pre-snap motion and having him go across on a short cross that Josh can just pluck it to him. He runs over a 5'10" DB and he's off to the races. Like there's different ways to get him the ball. But I think manufactured touches for him early while allowing him to still be good at what he's good at, which is running the deeper routes, allowing him to win at the catch point. I think that's going to be a really important thing for him to get. Yeah, exactly. 70 catches, 700 yards, 17. It's perfect.
Be fine with that. Yep.
Beauty. Chef kiss. Another thing that I want to talk about when it comes to wide receivers being separators, there's multiple ways for wide receivers to separate. It's not just guys that can juke a defender out of their shoes and make them fall over and find themselves 15 yards of space like Ladd McConkey. There's other ways to separate, including separating at the catch point. And Keon Coleman creates that late separation for himself very, very well. So while he might not have a ton of separation throughout his route, if he's able to get to his spot, which he's very good at doing, and Josh Allen likes throwing to a spot, if he's able to get to his spot and can manipulate that very large frame to create late separation at the catch point and come down with the catch, and then also has the strength to break tackles after the catch, that is a route to success in the NFL as well. So I see him more as that type of wide receiver that is going to continue to grow and get better. Like we said, it's been mentioned all over the place. He's only 20. He has a lot of football still ahead of him. And I think that he's going to continue to get better, learn as he gets into the league. He's the only wide receiver, by the way, that reached out to one Mr. Andre Reed asking for advice the second that he got drafted. Andre Reed tweeted about it. He goes, yeah, he's the only young wide receiver to reach out in a long time. Coleman's trying to get the wisdom and trying to learn from people how to grow and fit in the NFL. I think he's got everything that it takes, from athleticism to work ethic to character. I think that he's well on his way, and I'm excited to see him this summer when we start getting into camp and stuff like that. He's going to make some highlight reel catches and people are going to go nuts.
Yeah, and this is a great comment from Charles. Keon has incredible body control with his basketball background. That's also true. Multi-sport athlete. He played for Izzo at Michigan State. That's the thing, is like, if this guy, you can't rely only on being a contested catch guy, right? But I think people think that is the only thing he does, because at FSU, that's what they were asking him to do. It's not. There is far more to Keon Coleman's game than just contested catches. It's just what he's really good at. And that's what he got to be known. And that's why they kept feeding him the ball, because you are one of the few guys that we can actually trust on a 50-50 ball to come down with this. Again, when I bring it back to that Michigan State tape, there's one game against Wisconsin, it was a different game. I can't remember the matchup, where I watched their quarterback, or it was a trick play. And it was actually, I think, Jaden Reed who makes this pass. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I think it was Jaden Reed who threw the ball.
I think it was Wisconsin, if I remember it. I think you were on the right track. Yeah, it's a great play.
Trick play, Reed throws the ball. It's a duck. Like, it is a lame duck. Horrible pass. This DB is in perfect position to get this ball, and the absolute epitome of a Moss from Coleman on a play that he was not in any way. If that ball got dropped, if that ball got intercepted, I don't blame him one bit. He's on a completely different, not different side of the field, but he's far away enough where that DB's in perfect position, snatches it. And that's the part of Coleman's game where it's not like you're going to ask him to get a 50-50 ball on every route, but that's a part of what you'll ask him to do. And if you could be tasteful in how you're implementing those types of routes for him to go upfield, where maybe you haven't been doing it all game and all of a sudden he sneaks past the DB and gets that one step of leverage that he needs, it could work. So I have my reservations still. I thought they were going to go in a different direction. They didn't, but I'm looking forward to seeing what the kid does. And as a person, I mean, how can you not root for him? I am rooting for this kid to succeed. I want to see him ball out in Buffalo. He seems like the nicest dude. He's inspired me to go to my local Macy's, as all of you should go to as well. How can you not like what he has brought to the table there? So Coleman, rooting for him. I want to talk about some of these other prospects, though, John, because I'll let you just take your pick of the litter here because we went through the list earlier. But some names that you might have really just been a huge fan of the Bills drafting, or names that, whether we mention them or not, you want to talk more about and why you like them.
Man, I mean, I was audibly celebrating when they took Ray Davis. You know, we were down there by the stage when that pick was made. I'm a huge fan of Ray Davis. He can be a grinder if you need him to be a grinder. He can break tackles. He can make a guy miss in a phone booth. He's got pull away speed at a big back size, around 5'10", 220. Can't remember his exact measurements offhand, but he's got a big back build, which we went into this draft wanting them to take a bigger back. We wanted someone in that backfield to be a hammer to go along with James Cook. And that was a great pick to make that happen, because what I like about Ray Davis, he is not just a hammer. He's not just a guy that you hand it off to plod 3 yards forward. He also can break plays. He's a guy that is capable of turning on the jets, making something happen. If it's blocked up well and he's got one person to beat, he can make that person miss and house it. So it's just more weapons in the backfield. I'm imagining some two-back sets where you got James Cook maybe kicked out into the slot or in some funky formation, and Ray Davis is in the backfield. And, you know, just there's lots of possibilities for what you can do. And I love that he gives you that opportunity. Again, a Senior Bowl standout. We've learned that Brandon Beane loves the Senior Bowl. Guys that show out down there are guys that he typically is very interested in. So as a power back that also has speed, it's not just that he's a plotter, to be able to come into that Latavius Murray role to spell James Cook here and there, but to also have a lot of juice to offer when he does get his touches. I'm really excited about him. I think that he's a great second backup, second fiddle to James Cook in this offense.
We were at the draft stage, like on the side of it, and day 3, John and I went over there, just the two of us, because Thomas and Ian had to leave, and we were like, let's just check this out, like let's see who they take. And then they finally get to the 4th round, and we're like, all right, who do you think it's going to be here? We kept saying Malik Washington for like every single one, because I thought he would go higher, and then they take Ray Davis, and we both kind of just go, oh, because we like saw the vision. And I agree with all of that. And one name you mentioned, Latavius Murray, this is the replacement for that. I mean, I think what they wanted out of Murray consistently all throughout the year, they got flashes of, but never the finalized product. And this is a guy that 24 years old, but again, 4-year contract for a running back. If he's 28 and wants to come back, whatever, you don't really have to worry about that. I had him, I checked it, I think it was 5'10", 216, but each of the past 2 seasons, he's had 1,000 yards. In every year of his collegiate career, he's averaged over 4 yards per carry, and in his final season, 5.7 yards per carry. So that's an encouraging sign for someone who, as he's gotten older, the productivity has followed him. The thing that I'm excited about, apart from the change of pace and how he's going to hammer it, is the fact that you're getting a really good pass blocker, like someone that's got the frame, the sturdiness to pick up those blocks, someone that, if you're talking about maybe a little bit of uncertainty in your offensive line, if SVPG is the guy to be your center and you just want to work him in and make things a little easier. I'm not saying this guy's going to play center, just anyone to add into making your blocking a net positive. Ray Davis feels like the guy that could really do this. And also, give him the rock and throw him the ball. He can catch out of the backfield too. And with that breakaway speed, like you alluded to, that we saw on tape, as well as his balance, which I think is really good. This is a pick that I love for the Bills and I'm really encouraged by. I want to see him right away, really. I also want to see, just side note, like I hope Frank Gore Jr. can make this team. I do, because I just want the kid to make it. That's just a completely unrelated thing. I just thought of him while we were talking about Davis, because why not? But I'm excited for the future of this running back room this season, and I think this kid is going to be a really quick contributor that the fans are going to like. So, who else, John? Who else you got on this list?
Let's see. I mean, really, I like them all.
Everybody.
They were all really great picks. I mean, I'm really excited about them all. I don't know where to start here. I'm sure that you've already spent an hour gushing about Dwayne Carter, so we don't need to go down that rabbit hole.
It was like 10 minutes, but I was gushing. But the chat,
you were gushing hard. I mean, I guess what I'll do is I'll talk about Daquan Hardy here because he's a really interesting late pick. What I like about Daquan Hardy is that this is your very stereotypical dart throw on athleticism late in the draft. You know that the secondary of this team is good, but cornerback is still a position group where you could always use some depth. I think this team in particular does need depth at the quarterback position. Daquan Hardy ran I think it was a 4.39, if I remember right. So he comes in bringing a ton of athleticism with him, can factor into that backfield. He was like the number 3 corner on the Penn State defense last year. Showed flashes. I think he was like second team all Big Ten, if I remember correctly. So I like the late round athletic corner just as a dart throw. You have all these late round picks. Some of them might not end up making the team. You don't know. Because what we were talking about all weekend in Detroit is that you might want to consider doing a couple trade ups just so that you're not having to leave some of them on the wood shavings pile when you have to whittle it down. But they used a lot of those picks. We still walked out of here with 10 picks. I don't know if everyone's going to make the team or if they're going to end up, being practice squad players. But I think going with a lightning fast cornerback in the 6th round, it's kind of hard to turn your nose up at that pick as not being a valuable use of a late round dart throw.
It wouldn't be a Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott draft if they didn't take one corner at past round 5. Daquan Hardy was almost like the most predictable thing, like just because they needed a damn corner. And if they didn't do it, I was going to ask what was wrong. But yeah, to me, this feels like your Saran Neal replacement potentially, right? Like a guy that you're probably going to mold into a special teams role, but also a backup slot corner that can do well there, but also had experience playing some man-to-man in college, which I like because it feels like more man is a possibility, if not something I expect them to do in this defense this season with some of the personnel changes. Again, maybe giving more trust to Kyer Elam as well when they want to shift from man or zone to man. And then, if you trust, Rasul Douglas and Benford in zone a little bit more, like this is a guy that I could see having that role. I don't think it's going to be anything major, but really just some quality depth, a young guy, someone that's fast. And then if you got to turn to him, it wouldn't be something that you truly dread because maybe you have some faith in his ability. So I like that pick, but I got to rave about one more. This is one that I knew of his existence. I knew he did well at the combine. When I saw the name, I'm like, okay, I get it. This makes sense. Let's see what they do. Because another name that they took, or another name got taken that I wanted. But Javon Solomon. Okay. Let me tell you something. I popped on the Western Kentucky game, right? That's the only one I had access to. Everything else has been from reading or like understanding what he did in his combine. So this is the only game I could see. Him against Western Kentucky. Dude. I am excited about this kid. Now, let me tell you something. I'm not acting like he's going to be the next Von Miller. I know he loves Von Miller, and I know he wants to learn from Von Miller. So this rant, a good one, is not me expecting him to be more than what I think he will be, which is a situational pass rusher. But when he rushes, you notice it. He pops off. He is explosive off the line. He can move people around. He can go through doubles if he needs to. There is so many things about this kid that I really love. His bendy nature, his athleticism, the way that his arms, like I think he's got good arm length for being a shorter guy. And the one thing I was worried about is when you're 6'1", are you going to get bullied in the run game? And I think that happened a couple of times, but I also saw him use his size to his advantage where he had that angle to kind of get under your pads and push you, which I really liked watching from him. And I was like, I think that this kid, the injury is probably a part of it, but also the fact that he played at Troy probably knocked it down. Leading the FBS in sacks, 16 sacks, and you see it on his tape that those were not accidents. This guy is a dog with a mean nature to his game, a very high motor, and someone that I am really excited to watch. I hope he can do well in camp, well enough to be a rotational depth piece. But if you're telling me like, hey, 3rd and long, and we want to get this guy out on the edge, I think he could do a pretty good job of it in the NFL. I'm really excited. What do you think about Solomon?
I'm a big fan, and you have to love the small school out of Troy pick in the late rounds. Just makes your heart go pitter patter. He's undersized at the defensive end position for sure.
Yeah.
He's just over 6 foot, just under 6'1", 246 pounds. So he's small, but he doesn't look that small on the field. That burst, that athleticism, that ability to turn the corner is great. Yeah, Solomon did have an ACL injury. I think it was 2 years ago, if I remember correctly. But I think that he actually, wait, am I wrong on that? Hold on. John Solomon. I'm going to look this up because I can't remember when he had it. I'm going to have to get back to you on that. I cannot remember when that happened.
Oh, on my end. I forgot I have two screens too.
Yeah, there you go. But what I do love about the film that I have on Javal Solomon and what I've seen is that the strength of that inside arm for him to create separation when turning the corner is so good, especially for a guy that's smaller. Even though he's just 6'1", 248 pounds, his arm is almost 34 inches in length. So he has really long arms at the defensive end position, which helps to keep offensive tackles out of his chest. So I love the athleticism. I love the burst around the corner. The athletic testing confirmed it. 37-inch vert, 9 foot 11-inch broad, and a 4.72 40-yard dash for a defensive end. So the athletic testing was there. I think that he's a great pick in the late rounds as an athletic defensive end. He's also walking in wearing number 56, which is Leonard Floyd's jersey number, by the way, which is kind of interesting. That was announced like an hour and a half ago. So yeah, get him in there, number 56. It's a bold move to give him the good jersey number as a late round pick, but I think they think pretty highly of the athleticism as a rotational guy as well. And yeah, right there, 16 sacks after ACL injury. That was my thought too, is that he came in, played a fully healthy year this year, and was uber productive. So not concerned at all about the ACL. Apparently they're not either to take him where they did. Yeah. But yeah, he's fun, man. He's just a ball of energy. And I love that in a pass rusher, right? You just want that relentless motor and athleticism to keep pushing, to chop down the outside arm, to be able to turn the corner and get after the quarterback. He can do that. So excited to see what role he can carve out.
And listen, like, again, being realistic about what this class was, because we knew that it's not the deepest edge class, but when this guy tested, he was a name that popped up on a lot of radars. I knew his name, and I was like, hey, if this guy falls to you in a later round, let's go for it. And they needed the edge depth. So if this guy happens to be maybe a foundational piece that, again, not a full-time starter, not someone that you were going to turn to for an every down type of player, but rather just someone that can clean up the mess akin to maybe what Shaq Lawson's role was last year. Like, that'll be a lot of fun because I think he has a lot of juice. And again, I didn't know about the ACL injury. I just checked banged up bills and I didn't see it there. So I'm going to keep looking for it. I don't remember what year either, but if he is playing at that level post ACL injury, then I'm not worried because I couldn't. Yeah. If you told me that, I would have been stunned because he looked as explosive as ever. So that is a name I just wanted to mention because I'm really encouraged. But John, any final names before we wrap it up this evening on someone you want to highlight or anything that they took that we might not have talked enough about?
You know, I know that you talked about him right before I came on, but I just want to throw my 2 cents at the Cedric Van Pran-Granger pick. I think it's super interesting, and I like what I was hearing before I came onto the show here. I definitely think he can compete for starting center. I think that he's a very athletic center who, when you look at his like RAS and all of his athletic testing, that's based on what a guard is, not what a center is. So for a center, his athletic testing score is actually going to come out even higher than what it did at the guard position. But I like him a lot as a veteran, as a leader. We've heard it a lot that we lost all these captains this offseason. So bringing in guys that had that captain experience, that leadership ability, I think is very interesting. Throw the 40-yard dash out when it comes to linemen, but the 10-yard split matters. And his is a 1.77, which is in the 86th percentile. So he's quick off the line. Shorter arms as you'd expect on the interior offensive line, but plenty of size. That's 6'4", so he's got the range, the height. I like him. I think that he's gonna be really fun. I think that he's gonna push for a starting role on the interior of the offensive line. It wasn't the Jackson Powers Johnson center pick, but we did get one. So
Yeah.
I think it's definitely an interesting pick that they used to bring in a SEC starter that allowed very little pressure, very few sacks, and had leadership experience. I think that's a really good pick.
I think it was interesting to see, too, how much they addressed offensive line depth in this draft. And I don't know if they felt like maybe the edge of the draft was just, hey, let's just try to take some flyers on some guys and see if we can develop into something. Because I felt like the depth in their offensive line room was already decent, pretty solid. But, I mean, hey, a guy like SVPG is someone that, again, I'm really, really encouraged by the metrics. I'd have to watch more of him to really get a true perspective on how he is as a pass blocker. But allowing 1 sack in 4 years is not an accident. That's not something you just do when you're playing that caliber of competition. And I think
in the SEC. I mean, that's
SEC.
not nothing.
No, not nothing at all. And then I was talking with Ryan about this, but he's got a slightly bigger build than Mitch Morse too. So it almost feels like if you're looking for someone to inherit that role, this is a guy that with that build combined with the athleticism, combined with the fact that he's a good downhill blocker and someone that can maybe enhance your running game, it kind of leads me to this one point or one thought I've been having. And I talked to Anthony Prohaska about this yesterday, just in messages, because I was curious about his thoughts. And he said something, I'm paraphrasing it, and it's very, very like loosely translated. So Anthony, please don't kill me. But it was something along the lines of like talking about how like the Bills running game is going to be like a point of emphasis. Not that it's going to be everything they do, not that it's going to be like the only thing they do. I don't want to make it sound like that, but that like last season, like the second half of last year, where they really tried to get that running game going and make it more effective. A guy like SVPG pairing with this offensive line and maybe showing up some stability, adding that athletic profile and making it a little bit more powerful, I think will play into them being more effective as runners, especially with a younger guy like Ray Davis taking the power back role and having a myriad of ways to beat you, which would in turn make things a little bit easier for guys like Dalton Kincaid, Keon Coleman, when you're talking about actually passing the ball, whether it's off of play action and off of different looks that might be able to get these guys, more favorable matchups in the back end. So if this is a guy that can contribute to that and develop as a center, I'll be encouraged. Again, that is a loosely translated thing. If I botch that, if Anthony somehow sees that, please let me know. You're welcome to correct me. But yes, I think that this is a prospect I'm very encouraged by. I think, again, I talked about it with Ryan too, a big part of why he probably fell is that he only played center and you want versatility. And it's like, sure, but if we need a center, then that's fine. Because really, as much as I want the McGovern experiment to work and having David Edwards slide into guard, let's give this a shot. Because honestly, either one has risk to it. If the young guy, I think he's 24 years old, I think I have that right, 24 years old, is able to mold into something as a starter in this league, I'm for it, and I'm very encouraged to see the result. And appreciate this, Aaron. Thank you for this very nice comment that says, great pod, boys. We're going to wrap it up very shortly. John, do you have any final thoughts on this class, something you wanted to say before we signed off?
I'm very pleased. I'm happy with it. I know I had a very visceral reaction. I'm glad that we weren't on the air when we traded out of 28. Oh God, there it is. I was just talking about it. I had a very, very visceral reaction to trading out of 28. We went down to the stage to watch it live, and when we saw the B-roll clip, the Kansas City Chiefs highlights come up on the stage, we're like, "Wait, did they trade? No. Did they trade the pick?" It was like, my God, that's John Cena's music. It was crazy.
Literally.
And then all of a sudden we saw that the pick had been traded. And I went, it's Worthy. Like, I turned to you guys and I'm like, they're taking Worthy. Like, there's no way that that's not what the pick was. And then it happened and it was visceral. I was so angry. I was just angry that they got Worthy, not that the Bills traded down, because I'm totally fine with it. And I talked about it leading up to the draft in a couple different places. If they didn't like the way the board was falling, a lot of teams around the league had a ton of second round grades on a ton of players. That was a very common thing. So Kansas City wanted to get Worthy. We didn't want to take him there anyways. We got an extra third out of it and got a potential stud defensive tackle in Dwayne Carter. I mean, in hindsight, it worked out beautifully. It worked out great. I think that they absolutely nailed it. I love Xavier Worthy as a talent. I think he's incredibly good at football, which sucks as a Bills fan to hear about the new guy that went to Kansas City. But if that wasn't what we wanted, if we wanted the big body dude that gives that outside presence instead of the smaller speedster, even though he's a very polished route runner also, I can't fault them for getting more value to get the guy that they wanted to take anyways. Like that was their plan, and they executed it, and they made it happen. So you made Kansas City give up a third instead of just taking Coleman at 28 and Worthy falling into their lap at 31, 32, obviously 32.
Yeah.
So instead of that happening, you got the extra pick out of it, which is a beautiful thing. So I think they nailed it, and I think that it's exciting. Yeah, great comment there. Everyone's going to compare Coleman and Worthy just because of the trade scenario, but Carter might end up being the best of the bunch out of that trade.
Yeah,
it's entirely possible. Like Dwayne Carter could be an absolute force on the interior of the defensive line. So I'm not gonna hate that whatsoever.
No, and I was there saying, hey, if Brandon Beane wanted him, and I said this on multiple shows after the fact, he would have taken him. If Brandon Beane wanted to get, he would have taken him. What it sounded like to me was they had multiple second-round grades, like you just alluded to, and they wanted to make the trade. And they did. And listen, who else was on the board that you truly think Kansas City was going to snag at that spot based on how they run their offense and based on the profile of a lot of receivers they've taken in the past? Is it a guarantee that they were going to take Worthy? No. But is it really possible that given what Andy Reid likes and how they function, that Worthy was a very top target for them? Yeah. And they took him at 28. So I think with Buffalo, if you wanted him, you would have made this play. Kansas City gives you a third-round pick. You take it. You move down. If you didn't do it, another team was they were going to probably try and do it with another team. And then, the same result happens, but you get nothing. You just made the pick. And granted, first round pick, whatever. But I'm very fine with taking the third. Obviously, if Worthy's great in this league, then he's great in this league. And it would suck to be, attached to that the same way the Bills are attached to Mahomes for the rest of eternity. But honestly, you can't be afraid of who you trade with. You have to worry about your team like every other person way wise beyond me or coaches in the league have said. I can't suffer paralysis from analysis in this situation, see Kansas City and say, no, I can't do that. I hate Kansas City. If they're giving me the third round pick I want, and I could turn that into someone that will address a position of need and be very effective at it, I'm going to take it and I'm not going to regret it. And you can't worry about what they do, because if your team's good enough, then you can compete with anybody. So that's the kind of mantra I keep trying to, the drum I keep trying to beat for Bills fans. It's hard to look at it in hindsight and say, wow, we traded with Kansas City, but we did, and we have to live with it. And whether Worthy's good or bad, it doesn't matter, because the Bills will construct the team their own way, and we're going to attack it how we need to. So that's my final thoughts on that. John, where are the people? Where can they find you? Where can they see your content? Where can they watch you?
They can watch me as one of the co-hosts of Cover One Draft Weekly. And in case you think the draft is done and now there's nothing to talk about, I already have almost 200 names in my 2025 database. I'm ready to go. I'm already starting. It is film watching season year round, starting to break down next year's guys, and it's going to be great. I'm going to go harder into this next year's draft class than I've ever gone before, and I cannot wait to just have the full-on depth of knowledge of every single prospect that's coming out. Basically, I want to play Stump the Truck next year. That's what I want to have happen. It's going to be great. But it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited about it. We're going to be breaking down not just the Bills, but from a national perspective, this year's NFL draft. Start looking ahead to training camp battles. Start talking about how that might impact things, who's winning spots, who might be struggling out of the gate. And then before you know it, we're starting to ramp up for the next college football season, and we start turning our eyes to next year's prospects. Spoiler alert, it's incredibly rich at wide receiver again. So get ready. It's going to be a lot of fun. So excited. Yeah, like I said, co-host of Cover One Draft Weekly. You can find that wherever you listen to your podcast. It is on the Cover One College Football channel. So if you don't subscribe to that channel separately of the main college or Cover One channel, please do so. We would love to see you over there. And that's about it. On Twitter at John Helmkamp, I'm basically always on it like a sicko, and you can talk to me about prospects anytime you want.
Hell yeah, John. Thank you so much for being here again. I know it was a bit of short notice, but I appreciate you taking the time to talk about these prospects with me. Again, all of you in the chat, please follow them on Twitter. Check out their show. It's great content, and it's going to inform you a lot about a lot of players we will be talking about around this time next year. So get ahead of the curve. Learn about some exciting prospects. I'm still learning about them as well. I know John and I have talked so many times about, learning about this insane upcoming class with a bunch of different positions, and I'm really looking forward to it, and you should too. But everybody that joined us today in the chat live, if you are listening to us after the fact, again, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Under Review. This show is not possible without all of you who watch it and contribute and engage with us every single Tuesday night. So thank you again so much for your time, your attention. I will be back next week with another episode. But in the meantime, enjoy your Tuesday night. Stay safe. Get a good night's rest. Stay hydrated with the delicious taste of Spindrift Lemon.
Hashtag not a sponsor.
Hashtag not a sponsor, but that's a great sponsorship idea. I'm going to email them relentlessly until they block me. And to answer this question,
Do it.
I think it's a question. No, I'm Italian, but good guess. I am I think 94% Italian or something like that. I don't know. But either way, that's not how I thought I was going to outro this show, but now you all know, if it wasn't obvious with the capital R. Thank you all so much for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. Mamma mia, I'm ending the stream. Goodbye. Have a great night.